Hi everyone, and welcome to the sixth and final episode of Real Talk Live at 5, a mini-series following entrepreneurial women as we try to navigate our lives and businesses through these really complicated and difficult times. Today I'm really excited to be welcoming my final guest, freelancing female writer Jasmine Waters, and we're going to be discussing the issues that she raised in her recent publication on values-driven brands. Just letting her in now. Welcome, Jasmine. So hi Inga, hi Jessie's lols. Just waiting for Jasmine to join us. Hi darling, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
You're looking fabulous as always.
Thank you, as are you.
What have you been up to today? Anything fun?
Not really. I mean, I had the magazine that I did my original coming out piece for come today, which is really cool. But most have just been sweating. It's an absolute sweat box up here. So hopefully it doesn't show.
Yeah, no, that. I've been getting a bit of a sweat on this week. Well, anyway, let's dig in then. So, Jasmine, as the youngest woman that we've had featured this week, you were still pretty early on in your career. I just wondered if you could give us a quick overview of your journey so far and what inspired you to become a writer.
Okay, so my background is in fashion. I sort of started doing every single unpaid internship under the sun, just creating roles for myself, and then sort of became a marketing content creator. I hate that term, but it was what I did. At the same time, I was studying at London College of Fashion, and sort of halfway through my undergraduate degree, I was a bit like, I don't know. I don't think this is the best way I can contribute. I don't think this is the best way I can use my own voice. So sort of during the process of that, over the last couple of years, that was a 4-year course, so it took a long time. I somehow tried to merge my job into becoming more of a content writer. So now I more so act as a fashion journalist. I'm still in fashion, but now I have like another string to my bow. I made the jump to study an MA in script writing. So I'm trying to cover all my different bases. It's still a case of, different fingers and different pies, all of that. So a lot going on still.
All of the pies. Just going to ask, can you just like swap from headset to normal?
Oh yeah, sure.
It's got quite a time delay on it for some reason.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes, 100. I did that the other day myself. I had the earphones on and I couldn't hear much of what was going on. So hopefully this is easier for you too. So just picking up on what you said there, so that was quite a brave decision then to have kind of been on one trajectory in fashion, then to make that switch into script writing. That's quite a different art, I guess.
It is. Throughout the two, and sort of as a kid as well, I've always written. It's just more so when I took the step to sort of get somewhere in the fashion world, that took a real back seat, if you like. Yeah, and I just was kind of thinking maybe I should. It came sort of, I was more pushed into it, so to speak. It took a lot of people to be like, you might want to look at this again, to sort of be like, oh yeah, actually this is what I've always been good at and I always like. So it's taken a while to sort of get comfortable with that idea.
But I think you said something about it didn't feel right and you thought you could be contributing more and using your voice in a better way. I think that's really admirable. So fair play to you. Which takes me on to my next question, which is, as you said, today you were published again in A Bundle of Sticks, and you shared your own coming out story, which is obviously a very personal thing to do. I just wondered what it's like to share such a private story publicly and how it's been received.
I mean, I don't really know how it's been received. Hopefully really well. Today it's like its first sort of debut out, so the jury's still out, I guess.
Or how
really weird.
Or how were you received when you came out in the first place?
A bit of it's been a long sort of journey to get comfortable in the way I am now, and taking that step to write it all down was a big one, but I'm really glad I did it because it sort of brings up a few questions that if anybody ever asks me for advice, it's the advice I'd want to give. So one of the big ones is, if you suspect that somebody has these kind of feelings and they're sort of getting to terms with themselves, whether that's a friend, a family member, or even in the workplace, don't push them to tell you, really. Wait for them to come to you, because I think the sort of psychological, emotional aspect of being pushed before you're ready to jump, it carries on for a long time. So it's just so important that we all sort of wait for people to come to us, especially if we want to, you know, be an effective supporter for them. And also just the argument that we see a lot with the sort of straight heterosexual media, that sexuality is something that is shoved down our throats, is the phrase that is often used. But I like to think that my sexuality is something that makes me me. The journey I've had from then to now and the way I see the world is what makes me so unique, and it makes me myself. So I think it's sort of important to have that counter argument there.
So a proud woman.
Today, yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, and just saw Emma Brooks put a comment saying, look how comfortable and confident you are now. So yeah, it shines through. Which is lovely to read. So yeah, I loved reading your piece actually about brands living their values, and in particular how you pulled out such clear examples of brands and businesses who had kind of been pretending publicly talking about Black Lives Matter, but their actions were quite different. So could you just talk quickly about the L'Oreal example, because I think that was a really clear one that you pulled out there.
Okay, so as we've been watching sort of the last couple of weeks unfold, a lot of brands and businesses have sort of been voicing their support in the form of social media, as many of us have. LOreal Paris was one of the ones to do so. They made quite a short statement saying, we stand with the community, blah, blah, blah. And immediately a lot of the comments were, well, hang on a minute. If we rewind 3 years ago, you fired Munroe Bergdorf, one of your models that was working with you at the time, speaking out against their racist experiences. And your response was to fire them. So how can we trust that you mean what you do if that's the kind of response you have when it's in action, you know, over the course of many years? So I think now there's a new head of the company. They reached out to her. There's been some kind of resolution made. We don't know the details. So hopefully there's a lesson learned there. But it's something we've been seeing a lot, especially over the last few weeks. It's always been happening, but even more so now, which is, it's a real shame.
Yeah, but I suppose businesses can't hide because they're being very clearly called out for performative allyship. So moving on to the next question, and I love this word. I actually looked it up this morning, and the root of it is in feminism, actually, when a group of women, as you know, were protesting, and they were literally like performing their protest and painting a wall to shout out about the fact that they disagreed with something. But it's taken on quite a different meaning in more recent times. What does it mean today?
Okay, so essentially performative allyship is a kind of fancy way of saying somebody from a non-marginalised group, so whether that's the colour of their skin, who they love, whatever it is, supporting or vocally supporting someone from a non-marginalised group, and that support actually causing more damage, even if that's in like a subconscious way, but or if it's for show, and you can really transparently see that, you know, through somebody as an individual or somebody as a business, their everyday actions and their everyday behaviour, it doesn't match up to the support that it all seems very superficial. So that's kind of a roundabout way of what it means today.
And when you say it has a negative effect, what do you mean by that?
So if somebody was to, I don't know, we'll take Pride as an example, just a tone of words, say, oh, I've then put it in such and such a way, and people are like, hang on a minute, you've not really considered what you've said here, because it affects somebody in this way and somebody in that way. So sometimes it can be really well intentioned, but just the execution is it ends up doing more damage in the long run.
Got you. And you talked about something when we first had an initial conversation, which was around kind of corporatisation of pride. What is your view on that?
I think it's something that gets worse sort of every year that we have pride celebrations. At the end of the day, pride is still a protest, even if some of us are still in a more privileged position within the community than others. There's still other people, you know, it's illegal to be gay in at least 200 countries across the world. There's always someone else somewhere else that we need to be fighting for. So if we look back a couple of years ago, I don't know if you remember, Manchester Pride booked Ariana Grande as like their headliner, and so many people were like, oh my god, it's Ariana Grande, we've got to see them in concert, let's go. So many people that, you know, are using sort of homophobic language, whatever, you know, 364 other days of the year, they're not supporting the community. They turn up, the ticket prices are hiked, and you just think, well, hang on a minute, we've come so far away from what we need a pride celebration to do. And the more the years go on, the more we're seeing that behaviour come to the fore, sadly, which is a real shame.
So I guess it's similar to the Black Lives Matter movement and people putting the Blackout Tuesday thing up for one day to be part of the buzz, but then not doing anything else about it afterwards. It's a similar thing if you just put the flag up and then take it back down again, but nothing actually changes. That's true.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Interesting. So let me think what I was going to ask you. Oh yeah, so actually just thinking about like kind of how crazy the world is right now. So we've got a pandemic on our hands. How are we going to be able to celebrate Pride if we can't come out in the streets the way that we did before?
That's a very good question. I think for now it sort of has to be parked, or at least manifested in different ways. A lot of people have been saying that Pride isn't cancelled, it's just refocused. We need to, you know, there's bigger things going on in the world right now, like Black Lives Matter. We need what we would usually channel into a Pride celebration to be the kind of support that we're giving to other marginalised groups, especially being the LGBT community. We would have nothing if it wasn't for the Black activists that started everything, the sort of rights and equality that we now have. There's still a long way to go, but we wouldn't. So the sort of interweaving and the responsibility that we as a queer community have is very, very strong. So it's more just that it's gonna, you know, we can have our parties any old day, so it just needs to sort of sit tight for the time being.
Yeah, so I saw quite a lot of focus on amplifying Black transgender lives from the Pride affiliate community. Have you seen kind of the voices being shared in the right way? Because I just thought it was interesting. We've had, you know, the negative response of all lives matter to Black Lives Matter, which is abhorrent. Has there been anything like that in the gay community? Like, you know, kind of transgender being a focus, or Black transgender people? Has there been any kind of rebuttal of a vein in the queer community?
Yeah, no, you're quite right. I think within the queer community itself, there is a lot of discrimination issues amongst the sort of subgroups, which again is really sad and something we collectively need to call out and work on. But I think it's quite apparent that the sort of Black trans lives, their GoFundMes are the ones that are the least donated to. Their voices are being, like, we've had Black trans lives lost since George Floyd. So it's making sure that a couple, at least two, that we're lifting them up and making sure that, you know, they're being just as valued as the cisgendered Black lives.
That's so interesting. And just picking up on that point that you said about within the subgroups, there's kind of bias and it's not homophobia, is it? If it is,
No, not necessarily, but I guess maybe it's a sort of hierarchy. I would just call it discrimination within the community itself, which is a real issue. If you look at something like Grindr, obviously that's a really popular gay dating app, and until last week they had an ethnicity filter. Absolutely crazy, and they've only addressed it in the last week and said, okay, actually we're going to take it off. It's like, well, this should never have existed in the first place. Like it's we've got a way to go.
Yeah, because I think another debate that is rising, or has been rising thanks to some very unhelpful voices, even in feminism, is, you know, women in feminists who are not supportive of transgender women as part of our feminist community. Again, I completely disagree with that, but there's all of these intersections, isn't there, with any kind of inequality that, as you said, you know, we've got a responsibility and a duty of care to raise each other up. And actually, as white women, we've got a hell of a lot of privilege, even though we've got our own challenges. I think really it's you know, this time has really made me see that for what it is. Like I knew it was there, but I hadn't appreciated just how much easier my life is in comparison until I started to listen.
Oh yeah.
And I guess it's the same maybe in the gay community with you know, kind of gays and lesbians being kind of okay, but if you're bisexual, that's not so cool. Within some parts of the community, transgender is a similar issue. So I guess it's the same, right? Like whatever cause you're supporting and want to be an ally of, or an activist for, is about inclusivity of all shapes and sizes and colours and variations, because freedom is freedom, right, to be ourselves.
Exactly. There's also the added issue. There's also the added issue for us. There's a total, you're right, you've hit on that really well. The bisexual erasure is something that is so prevalent within the community, which is one of our big problems. But there's also people feel that we are, so say somebody like myself is more normalized because there's a wider sexualization and fetishization, I can never say that, of us, and women, which it makes us feel like we're more normalized. But actually, if somebody was to turn around and say, oh, like, I want to see you kiss, but no, I don't want you to have a child together, because there's all these different kinds of issues still. Just, it's so ingrained in people's minds, and it's something that we need to be continually questioning. We must question everything that we see, everything that we are thinking ourselves, in order to be that most effective ally. That's what we need to do, and that's one of the things I've been talking about, especially with the fashion brands that I sort of give advice to on a day-to-day basis, is if you're not questioning that, then ultimately you're going to fall behind the consumer, especially during the pandemic itself. We're going to be looking at the human aspect of a brand, and the messages they're giving out is now going to become a priority in terms of the sort of brand loyalty and trust that's going to get us through this.
Yeah, so I work in a similar field, marketing field, in customer experience, and yeah, absolutely, like the brands that will be remembered are the ones that stood up, were human and spoke out. The ones that were either silent or did the wrong thing are going to have a really difficult time recovering after this. So it just makes good commercial sense to be inclusive, right?
Exactly. Alongside the obvious moral sense of we want to be the best, best as we can be.
Obviously it's been from your values, but like, if anyone ever had any doubt why it's good for business, the proof is in what's happening right now in terms of loyalty and people switching off from brands and boycotting them. So yeah, and just one point you said there about like lesbians being sexualized. I know I had a conversation with a guy and he was like, oh yeah, that's really hot, but like marriage and babies, absolutely no way. Like, as in, you know, seeing two women together as a couple wasn't like on the cards, but if it was on Pornhub, totally fine.
Exactly. It happens all the time. If I had £1 for every time it happened, you know, I wouldn't need to work. So yeah.
Would be rich. So yeah, so with it being Pride Month, and now we're talking about, to use your words, the gay stuff, which I loved. What does the performative versus authentic allyship look like specifically for the gay community, do you think? I know we've touched on a few things, but is there anything else that you call out?
I think it is sort of a case of, one of the things I talk about is this sort of, when we want to be an ally, or a business wants to be an ally, or an individual, whoever it is, we commit ourselves to this lifetime marathon of work. It's not a sprint in terms of, oh, let's see how many Instagram posts we can get up in the month of June to show that we're supporting the gay community. This is years and years and years of making sure that all of these needs are catered for. And if somebody isn't catering for every LGBTQIA plus, then you're not catering for us at all.
Yeah, I get you.
So yeah, there's been a good couple of business examples. If you take the sort of lifetime marathon idea that I just shared, if you look at somebody like Levi's, like they've been going for hundreds of years. They're the all-American brand, and they're, you know, every member of the family can buy from them, and they're the best at their game. And then the 80s comes around, and with it comes the AIDS crisis, and they're one of the best. They were one of the first brands to publicly donate to HIV and AIDS charities, which, I mean, I can't even imagine how much of a public risk that was. It risked the brand, but they were there for us, and they were there for our needs, and that created such a good foundation for them going forward to now. If they release a Pride collection, 100% of those profits goes to a charity, and for a brand that size and of its stature, that's exactly what we expect. So it's all about making sure that you have that same energy for 12 months of the year, rather than just for the 4 weeks that it's really commercialized.
Yeah, that's interesting. And yeah, so I guess you're saying kind of, you've got to put your money where your mouth is, literally, when it comes to, for example, donating to the charities that you apparently support the cause for. But it's come up a few times this week, the conversation around diversity and inclusion at a leadership level. So in my conversation with Lara on Tuesday, we were talking about racial diversity at a leadership level, and, you know, kind of female leadership at a senior level. What we still have is a load of straight, white, rich, middle-aged men that are non-disabled sitting on these boards and making the decisions that affect everybody that isn't represented around those tables. Do you have any thoughts on how the values of the organisation could be better reflected through the people that lead them, or how we can do a better job at that?
That's a difficult one. I think a couple of things we've seen in the last couple of weeks is people in them sort of CEO positions stepping aside and taking maybe a smaller director role, and be like, actually, come on, let's give somebody else the job. And it takes the people like that to let somebody else get their foot in the door at the very least, in order to make that change. But it is so important that these things aren't just normalized and reflected through potentially, I don't know, a business campaign, that it's also going on behind the scenes. So we can only hope, really, that people are going to take that initiative and take it upon themselves to sort of get that inclusion in the door.
Yeah, that was the Reddit director, wasn't it? Yeah, Laura mentioned that one as well, which, yeah. So we need to see more of that. But it feels like change is coming because of the feeling that's now so strong, especially around Black Lives Matter and equality, I guess, generally now. So what would your top 5 pieces of advice be for brands and businesses to be truly authentic allies?
Okay, number 1 is to listen, and that's to listen with an open mind and an open heart. Be free, like be willing to take on that criticism from the marginalized community, or a consumer base being like, hey, I don't really think you've got that right, maybe you'd like to sort of reconsider. And then if that does happen, be willing to apologize in a way that isn't defensive. Apologize, take that information forward and better yourself. So the best thing, any of us, even as individuals, is just to listen to what is going on, what is the experience, what are the feelings, what can we do to help. From that comes learning, making sure that it's embedded and it stays with you, and you're constantly checking in with yourself to make sure that you, with whatever privileges you have, like I'm sitting here in a dress, I've got full makeup on, I've got long hair, like within my own community, exactly, I have a privilege, and I need to be making sure that I'm checking in with myself to making sure I am doing everything in my power and my privilege that I can to help others. So that leads into the second one. The third is to just support, lift those voices up, and to try and make sure that you're not co-opting somebody else's experience from a non-marginalized place into your own voice, because it is really difficult, and it's one that you need to keep checking in with, but again, it's really important. The fourth is to, if possible, donate, and the fifth is to check your privilege. Just keep going on, keep checking, because even if you're not realizing you have one, the chances are you probably do.
So basically, check your privilege, check your privilege, check your privilege, check your privilege, and check your privilege. I saw some really great social media posts that was like, basically, if something makes you feel uncomfortable, check your privilege.
Yeah, there's some great ones. Like, if you have the time to stalk your ex, you have the time to research your privilege. So that's exactly, you can't get more straightforward than that.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, so I think it's a very similar theme that's kind of run throughout this week, has been about, kind of as women, there are intersections with our own feminism at all of these points, and our ability to support one another, lift other women up, raise their voices, and provide those platforms for them to be heard. I think it is just about being able to connect with something that isn't your own issue, and it's not your story to tell, but you have got the power to support and champion other people. So it was awesome talking to you today.
Thank you for having me.
I was going to say, you're going to do anything fun tonight, but the options are stay in.
I mean, this is the wild Saturday night. We're having it right now.
We've actually got our makeup on and our hair.
Exactly. We're ready to go. I
was thinking maybe you might have a casual walk around the block.
Yeah, probably. Sounds about right.
Oh, but we'll definitely have to hang out when we're allowed back out again. 4th of July here today.
Yeah, definitely. So. Yeah, exactly.
It's not long. But thanks so much. It's been really great to have you, and I'll speak to you soon.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers, Jasmine.
Yeah.
Take care. Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye.